Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here.
So the agenda we talked about, and then the personas, the features, and the Databricks workflow, the medallion architecture. So this is the slide I was just talking to, which is the medallion architecture, the bronze, silver, and gold pattern. And then at the top, again, this is somewhat dated, but it's a SQL Analytics, and that's Databricks SQL is what we call it now. And those are the features, that are part of Databricks SQL, including building some dashboards, and we'll actually show an example of that live as well. But really the power is this box on the right. This shows Power BI. James is actually using Tableau. And again, that's something we'll talk about a little bit, but it's actually a goal here to be sort of BI tool independent, at least to the degree possible. So again, having this data pre-aggregated in gold tables and sort of aligned properly allows us to be a little more BI tool independent. James, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about this slide, since it's the one you drew up and really highlights this workflow well.
Yeah, definitely happy to. And so really one of the huge benefits that we have seen through Databricks is this ability to not only have access to our own data, but we can integrate their data. So that's really this first step, is funneling whether it's our data or proprietary data or other third-party data into a commingled set, so that we can then get to the end story that we need. And generally speaking, we're going to need to hit multiple different data sets in order to do that. The next phase is really to transform that data. And so we want to write the SQL code. A lot of times we're actually working across teams, so whether that be our data engineers or data scientists or product managers, just to review, making sure that the logic that we're using, the methodology, is correct. So in that phase, we're really just transforming that data into these data marts, which AJ was just discussing. At that point, once we have these data marts saved, that's when we can pipe that directly into a BI tool. So our BI tool of choice is Tableau. And through that endpoint, SQL endpoint within Databricks, we're able to easily pipe that. And then that's where we obviously get our insights, turning that data to life and bringing that data to life. So definitely been a huge game changer in our eyes as far as that goes. But it's a nice illustrative example of how that process works.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Yeah, so quickly, the project that we're going to talk about here, I think is pretty exciting for a number of different reasons. One is it's around climate initiatives. This is a data set from S&P called True Cost, and True Cost actually is multiple components, and James will talk about that in a little bit. But those components roll up to a report that's called TCFD, and it's basically around climate disclosures that companies are making. And some of the data is modeled, some of it's collected. And right now, when somebody wants to get this TCFD report, this is really more, think of it as a portfolio manager that wants to see how their portfolio is doing along risk analysis. Sort of a spin on what used to be called portfolio attribution for things like value and growth characteristics. Now this is attribution along climate characteristics, and seeing if you have excessive carbon in your portfolio and things like that. Currently, this process is done pretty manually. It's Excel and PDF, and it's just doesn't scale real well, and it requires clients go back and forth with S&P. And so, having an automated solution that can do this was very attractive to these clients. And also, you'll see some examples, but having the data be interactive, the portfolio or the reports they currently get are pretty static, and just, you kind of scroll through page to page, but these dashboards are highly interactive. And so really bring sort of this process to life, if you will. Awesome. So James has already jumped in a little bit, and I think I've introduced him a little bit, but I'm going to introduce him a little more. Again, he's the product manager of visualizations at S&P. In my estimation, he's probably one of the top 5 or 10% of dashboard developers in the world. He's truly excellent at what he does, and he's now got 3 or more years of pretty hardcore experience doing this, and really seen what this process looks like top to bottom, and a lot of the pitfalls. So I'm going to let James introduce himself. And James, can you just tell us a little bit about your experience developing dashboards and what that journey's been like, and some of the ups and downs, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a really fun journey with working with dashboards just in general and taking that next step. So at S&P, we sell a ton of data, but one thing that we didn't really do is put together workflows or dashboards. And so it was really exciting to be a part of that team a couple years ago as just a project team. We were really building this marketplace platform, which is a marketing platform for all of our feed product. And so we wanted to put some visualizations on there in addition to just having information about our different data sets. And so that's where we came in, was coming up with some ideas. What kind of visualizations might we want to use? And we came up with a couple different concepts. And so working with our support teams who are really in sync with the clients and what they need. And so I'll actually share my screen and I can show our marketplace platform here. And AJ, is it up?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So here's Marketplace. And so again, this is our marketing platform. And I went ahead and opened up a window here just to have us ready. So this is estimates, one of the first data sets that we did visualizations for. And so we wanted to do two things. One, showcase the data set. So what's in the data set? Why should a client care, right, at the end of the day? And so we like to do that by joining different data sets together to tell a more complex story. So you'll see here, this actually was born off a client interaction. Actually, they had an ask very similar to this. And so we took the data sets that they wanted, put them all together. And so you can see, based on when these key events happened or these key developments, what were the estimates, what was the change in price, volume, and then we also have the estimates as of a given day. And then you can even drill down and read the article. And so it just gives you a taste, lets you play with the data more, get your hands into it. The second set of visualizations we wanted was like to show clients what kind of coverage we had with them not having to request it from us. So before they were like, hey, what kind of coverage do you have for estimates? And then we would take that, send them results, and it was very manual, I would say. So we wanted to give an easy way for clients to be able to access that data. So yeah, that journey was all done with SQL on the back end. We didn't have Databricks. We didn't have access to these cloud environments. And so it was kind of clunky. A lot of common table expressions. We had to do a lot of joins and things within Tableau prep to get the data just right. And so it was a little bit clunky at first, I'm not going to lie, but a huge learning curve. And that's really where the visualization journey started with S&P, was with these two types of visualizations to have on these different data set tiles on our marketplace platform.
And can you give the audience kind of an idea of the kind of scale, like about how many of these tiles and how many of these visualizations have you done at this point?
Yeah, so total tiles, I don't have the number there. I want to say 40, 45 unique tiles. But there, between those unique tiles, we have about 80, 85 visualizations now between the coverage, the showcase, and then now we're making even more elaborate ones, which is what Databricks has allowed us to do, which are these solution tiles, where we bring multiple different data sets together, almost like a workflow or more of an out-of-the-box template type solution.
And so I can imagine with 80 or 85 visualizations, as it began to scale, it was probably increasingly difficult to sort of automate and keep these things fresh and up to date. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so with every BI tool, they're going to have their own offerings as far as ways to automate, schedule these things. And so with Tableau, we were just getting started. We were still kind of in our infancy stages, I guess you could call it, just getting going. And they have an offering, and we ultimately thought we could accomplish the same thing without that offering. It had a really big price tag, and we just said, let's see if we can't do it without it. And so automating these, I mean, at first we were manually doing it just because we didn't have 85. But as you mentioned, as we started to scale, it became less and less reasonable for us to manually do these. And so we actually had to create this process using Git repo and then a command script, essentially, to force these prep files to load And then the way that we have everything stored within the Tableau server, all we have to do is tell the Tableau prep file to run, and then it stores the new data within that server, and that hyper file, and then the Tableau desktop file also sit on the server. So it's just a really easy connection path directly to our website here.
Excellent. So then I guess it was a little more than a year ago, S&P embarked on a white label instance of Databricks that you guys call Workbench. And can you tell me a little bit about how that changed your process and how you're doing visualizations today?
Yeah, 100%. And great question. So with Databricks, yeah, again, before this, it was really clunky. So we had SQL, a lot of common table expressions. We had a lot of these big queries, but it wasn't easy to take components out and share it between other workflows. And so it just wasn't an optimized solution. So as Databricks came, the first thing we did was thought it totally makes sense for us to build all of these showcase visualizations on top of our Workbench, which is this white label solution. So this is Workbench, again, powered by Databricks. So this is that white label solution. But we thought it would be so easy for us to share how we built this dashboard with the client through this notebook experience. And so immediately we started building the showcase visualizations on top of Databricks or Workbench in our instance. And that really showed us what was possible. So now that we can share these types of workflows, what other kinds of workflows might we be able to share? And that's when it really, the floodgates opened with ideas and these more elaborate types of stories. And so I talked about these, this is how we got started. But really next up is these solutions. And the one that we have had and we're talking about today is this TCFD Analytics Suite. And what this is, again, we brought in multiple different data sets together. So multiple physical or environmental or ESG data sets, as well as some others that were just needed, required for the workflow. So got to have some way to map from an ISIN to our unique identifiers within S&P, some market data to do a portioning so that you can know if I own 10% of Apple, that means I also own 10% of Apple's emissions. And so we need to be able to calculate the percent of ownership a shareholder has for a given company using market cap. And then last is sector. We like to do a lot of sector breakdowns. And so we're going to use GICS for that. But these really opened up, again, the doors for opportunity of not only just sharing a workflow, here's an idea of how you could use it, but here's a very structured way of using it. And in this instance, it's IM or investment management specific, to where we import a portfolio and a benchmark, and then we can do our analysis and compare that benchmark to the portfolio doing ESG analytics using these 4 different data sets. And so, not to get too into this one workflow too fast, but this is where it took us, is the ability to not only build these we have a series of these notebooks. And so now I'll get in a little bit to the demo, but you can see we have this folder where we have all these different data sets where we can share these workflows with clients. And we even have these more intricate ones that are we calling solutions that are more out of the box. A client could take this for their own needs, maybe need to tweak it a little bit, but we got them 80–90% there. And then it's just about little tweaks along the way. Even made it easy, spelled out, here's the different notebooks you need to run, the order you need to run it in. And then within each one, we have a lot of instructions and guide of what we're doing, why we're doing it, et cetera, et cetera. So
awesome.
Soon for sure.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about some of the different, sort of roles or people that participated in this process and kind of, who all the members of your team it took to get this done?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it was a lot of collaboration. And so we had resources from our investment management team, Manu Pilani, who is just a data expert over there. And so she's an ESG specialist on the IM side. We were also working very closely with our True Cost team. As you noticed, 4 of those primary data sets are True Cost. And so we were working very, very closely with them. Also wanted to coordinate and make sure that the methodology we were using is in sync with what we're using on the platform. Make sure that we're doing quality control as we go, just to make sure that everything is in sync and that it would and could be also optimized both by clients, but also internally for our own use cases.
And so a lot of those users were actually logging into the platform too, right? And using it and participating in the process.
Yeah, they are, absolutely. And so you'll see like in these notebooks, and these are the ones that have been finalized. But one huge asset, asset with Databricks or Workbench is the fact that we can collaborate. And so I need to get this out of the way. And so with these notebooks, we can share it with our team. I can limit what they can do to make sure certain people don't break it if they're not tech savvy, let's say, and they're just viewers of that notebook. So very easy to share and be working off of one single source of truth. And I think that's really important. Before we had Workbench, we were sharing these SQL queries via email and over Box in these shared places, but it wasn't like the single source live source of truth, where if somebody does make a mistake, we can go back and we can change it through revision history. We can schedule this over time to make sure it's always current. It's really changed the game for us, just as far as collaborating across teams and time zones, because we're also global. So we have people in Singapore, Philippines, London. I mean, you name it. We have people everywhere, you could say. Maybe not everywhere, but
lots of places. Cool. Yeah. I mean, you sort of teased us a little bit. Maybe we jump into the demo here. Do you want to show that dashboard just a little bit, and then maybe show a couple of the notebooks and how that came together?
I do, absolutely. Yeah, so love to start with the end game, because this is really the fruit of the labor. So this is the dashboard. And so at the very beginning, we have just a rough analysis around what data is encompassed within the portfolio and the benchmark. So how many holdings within each sector, what's the number of actual holdings within that portfolio, and then what's the coverage that we have within the different data sets. And that's going to be important because within ESG data and this analysis, if you don't have full coverage, then you have to fill that unknown value of holdings in somehow. So we're going to apportion that to the known universe. And it also just gives you a good indicator of if we only have 50%, then maybe we haven't hit that threshold to where it's clean and you can really trust it fully. So that said, it gets into these 4 different sections. So the first section you'll see is carbon performance, which is emissions. And so we have these different kind of carbon scope types. Most clients care most about 1 and 2, but we have other supply chain, direct other, first tier and indirect. And so what's nice is as clients want to, they can interact with this dashboard. And this is something that's very different from the PDF. And I actually have the PDF open. And so this is the original of what we were able to offer our clients. Is they would send us a CSV with their portfolio holdings. They would tell us which benchmark they want to be using, and then we would end up with this output that we send them. So here's these carbon performance section, fossil fuels and stranded assets, Paris alignment, and then lastly, this scenario analysis, or not lastly, carbon earnings at risk, and then lastly, physical risk. And so what we wanted to do was take this this flat PDF. It's not interactive. You can only get it in one scope at a time. So if a client wants to know multiple different scope types, then they would have to get multiple reports. And so it's not the most user-friendly in that capacity or scalable. So the idea was, let's make this scalable, let's make this user-friendly, let's make it interactive. Not only that, but you can click on these different sectors, for example, and now change it from a portfolio benchmark analysis to a sector level. I don't know why my computer's going slow today, so apologies if it's not wanting to register.
So that kind of like top-down analysis was kind of central to this flow, right? So being able to start with a sector and then see the holdings in that sector, and then maybe even dive all the way into the individual company level data, right?
Yep, and some of the sections definitely do get into that company level. So the emissions is more aggregated, as well as the carbon performance. But as we get into Paris alignment, you'll actually see. So this is showing the companies that are or are not in alignment with the Paris alignment agreement. And so as you were just saying, you can see from a portfolio level, we then drill down and go into more and more deeper granularity. So now we can select, hey, let's take a look at our energy sector. And it's going to change our companies to where now we're looking at companies within energy from the worst Paris alignment score to the best. And you can then drill into these companies and see their emissions trajectory and whether or not they're in alignment with the 2-degree alignment for Paris alignment.
And quickly, I meant to ask, when you're showing that PDF, that process took like multiple weeks for the back and forth with the client to ultimately generate that PDF, right? So multiple interactions with an analyst, and multiple weeks to get that done.
Yep, and it's highly manual. So we have a parts team who will take that request from the client. They have to use several different data sources to compile the data together. During this process, they're talking to the clients, confirming that they have the information they need for the analysis. And then beyond that, sometimes there's a delay. And so because the demand is so high, there's a wait. And so not only do you have to wait for the process to happen, but then you have to wait for them to go through the process and actually manually process this information. So definitely not the most ideal or efficient way to get that information.
Awesome. Maybe let's jump in and show the audience some of the notebooks now.
Yeah, I love it. So getting into the notebooks, I don't know why I can't get this thing to go away. So I'm gonna drop this down just a little. Getting into the notebooks, as you can, or as I showed before, we've organized it in such a way that a client could come in and very easily just run each notebook and then get to the outputs that they need. And then we even have some dashboards so they can do some high-level analysis within Workbench itself, not even needing Tableau. So getting into the first one, this is just creating a database, so I'm not really going to get too deep into that. This true cost data, now this is to pull all the information that we have for all companies within each of these data sets, and that allows us to do that coverage check. These are pretty basic SQL queries. I'm not going to get really too into the weeds with those, but where it really all comes together is this portfolio notebook. And so this portfolio notebook is where we import and we give instructions. As you can see, we've tried to lay out exactly what it is we're doing, what it is that's required from the clients, what data sets they're going to need to be able to use this notebook, the process, so what we're about to go through. And then here, for example, is because we're asking the client to import a CSV file, these are the fields that we require, enable for us to do it. These are the formats they need to be in. But once you have that, and once you plug that in, we've written all the code for you. So it's going to run checks on that imported CSV to make sure we have everything we need. We're then going to enrich that data. So we have cross-reference services taking the ISIN, again, going to map that with the S&P unique identifier. And once we've done that, we can then link into any of our data sets. So our market data, the true cost data sets, getting the sector data or the GICs, and getting us to this really end output here, which is going to include the coverage for each of the different data sets, the latest fiscal year we have for that company, only looking back 3 years. So we have all this logic built in. We've also included the actual formulas. So this is the logic that we're going to take to calculate the value of holdings for the benchmark, because that's an extra step to get it apples to apples comparison with the portfolio. So you can see a lot of work going into this, to shaping that data, jumping between SQL and Python to get to these gold tables, or what we call data marts on our end. And to see this final data mart, this is what ultimately will be fed into each of the 4 what we call calculations notebooks. And that's what is going to transform that data into the outputs we need for the graphs that you saw within that dashboard. So this is really just some metadata around the portfolio itself. And then that next step, oh, sorry about the clicking around, is to do the actual calculations. And so I've got our physical risk data set open up here. Let's scroll back to the top. You'll see again, we've tried to notate what it is that we're looking at, what are we going through each step of the way. But the first step here, as you can see, we're going to bring in this portfolio data that we did from our last step, merge it with the data that we had brought in for the coverage check, and then start to do our calculations. And so we want to calculate our sector weight average score with the rebalanced weight in order to get to our new values. And that's how we're showing the client this is the formula to do a portfolio aggregation, which is very important. Very different than looking at a company independent or not in a portfolio. But at the end of it, we're doing the calculations, we're doing the aggregate calculations so that everything that we need can be in a very simple view for us to import into Tableau or really any other BI tool. We try to do it as BI agnostic as possible so that a client can plug it into anything that they need and they have the info they need. So the raw value, they have that sector weighted average score adjustment. And then we also have portfolio benchmarks, sector weights, as well as the actual scores on the different aggregate levels. So that's the calculations notebook. And then at the end of it, if a client doesn't have Tableau, for example, even within Workbench, we have these dashboards available to where they can really do some pretty easy lifting through here. It's not going to be as fancy, obviously, as a Tableau dashboard, but still extremely powerful just to have it all in one place.
Excellent. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next. You mentioned using some dashboards within Workbench / Databricks, and was going to ask you to show that. So I'm glad you did that. Yeah, I actually have some dashboards even just in the notebooks themselves, right? Sort of some quality check or maybe process check type notebooks.
We do, and these are like supplemental. So that one is fancy. We took that one a little bit to the next level, but even these are just built into the actual notebooks. So that you saw was in the SQL Analytics side of our Workbench or Databricks. But here you can also see it from the notebook side. So we built another basic set of charts or a dashboard with different charts to look at that same data here.
And this was probably most useful just to kind of make sure that you had all the data and the numbers kind of checked out, sort of almost like a QA part of the process, I would imagine. Is that true?
Yeah, we treat it as a sanity check, but we also like to illustrate the fact that you don't have to have a BI tool. Really, you could do a lot of analysis in here. And just to illustrate that there's a lot of power built into Workbench as well.
Awesome. Cool. And I'm jumping you around a little bit here, but would you mind showing kind of the jumping off point then to Tableau within Databricks SQL and how that connection's made?
So going back to our dashboard. So I mentioned the SQL endpoint, and I mean, one thing everybody loves is the cluster, the Spark cluster technology that Databricks offers. And the SQL endpoint is an extension of that, right? So we have this visualization endpoint that we can then speak outside of Databricks with. So using just really easy credentials, and we always will plug hyperfiles into our Tableau desktop file, but that's really just for performance reasons. So in here, you'll see, and I think my VPN knocked out, so I got some errors going on, but it's really easy to connect to that data. Once we have these credentials from that endpoint that I was showing you, and then we use a personal access token as a password, then you're able to see, you'll see on the left-hand side, these are all the different gold tables or data marts that we have created for the visualization. If we go back and actually look within Workbench, you'll see a same folder. So we have client DB here, and you're going to see these exact same tables. So it's incredibly powerful being able to really easily pipe into that data using credentials and then just have it all at your fingertips. And I know you saw it in prep, but in Tableau, you could have the exact same setup, do live connections, but we just did it for performance reasons as well.
Excellent. That's a pretty amazing stuff, and thank you for showing that. Did you have any other dashboards you kind of maybe wanted to show the audience before maybe show off a little bit? I know you've been working on some cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess our next latest and greatest and our investment management team has been bringing us a lot of these ideas. There's a lot of demand out there in the market, and especially around this TCFD and physical risk. And so here's another concept where it's not bringing in all these different data sets, but it is bringing in really just physical risk, but it's about the coding behind it. And so a client gave us a list of properties, and using just a property name, We were able to then pull in the longitude, latitude, link that up into our database, doing a rough mapping, and then assign actual physical risk scores to these properties. And we're seeing a huge demand for this. So it's really exciting. And to see the different views they want to see the data in, because each client kind of has a different takeaway that they're looking for, or maybe different personas that at the end of the day will be viewing these. And so it's been fun to work with the different clients and put these, maybe even the same type of data, in a lot of different ways, together in a lot of different ways, because of the different lenses they're going to be viewed through.
And you've been talking a lot about your clients through this process. I'm curious to kind of double click in on that a little bit. And where are your clients meeting you on this? Like what's their engagement level? Do they are they asking you to build these dashboards for them? Do they want to take the workbench and these notebooks and do it themselves? Like kind of what's the vibe in the market there?
Oh, that's a great question. And so it's a mix of all of it, but I would say that we're seeing more and more clients that just want us to build it for them. They're saying, hey, here's the data we want. We don't have big teams to do these things for you. So the more out of the box kind of a solution you can give me, the better off we are. We have some coding teams, but maybe they don't have a ton of bandwidth. But then on the other side of it, we have some clients that have already built these things on their end. And they're basically saying, now we want to see what you've built to compare it to what we've built and make sure that we're in sync, or make sure we didn't miss anything, or maybe we're doing, they're thinking they did something better than we did, thought about these different aspects. So a lot of different client types, and different levels of technical skill, I would say. But I would say it's starting to lean more and more towards that they want us to build it for them, or at least get them close to not having to do a whole lot.
And what about internal clients? Like what about teams within S&P?
Yeah, we're getting lots and lots of traction with internal teams across divisions. So S&P, we have just tons of divisions, private data, credit data, alternative data, Panjiva, which is supply chain data. I mean, we're all over the place. And so one of the powerful things about Workbench is now we have all the data in one place. We can collaborate with all these different teams. We can collaborate with our 451 team and our IHS team and our credit ratings team on a single dashboard, and be communicating around that all in one place, leaving notes for one another, comments, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's really created a lot of excitement, and they all see this as a great place for them and their teams to be working too, and to then be able to share their work with others.
Awesome, James. I appreciate your time today, and this has been amazing stuff. I'm just impressed every time I see these dashboards. I think for the audience's benefit, I might want to just take 2 seconds here and sort of wrap up and sort of bring back what we talked about. The first thing being kind of just using Workbench is the overall workflow for building these aggregates through the medallion architecture, really focused on those gold databases for serving the BI layer. I think that it's really important to mention the goal of having the data be sort of BI tool agnostic. That seems like a little over principled to me. I imagine each BI tool has its own nuance, but to the degree possible, having the data all already prepared so that people could consume it in multiple places. And really, it was interesting just hearing that history of how, you used to have to do this in these large SQL queries and in this sort of non-interactive manual way. And now you're able to automate all this. So thanks again for your time. And I really appreciate that. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A box, but happy to take a few live if anybody has questions. Feel free to type them in the Q&A box or even the chat if you want. And,
If you raise your hand, you can also be unmuted. Right. Well, it looks like you guys covered everything really well.
Nailed it.
Go ahead and call it a day. Thanks so much for joining and for sharing. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. looking forward to next time.
Thanks, James.
All right, cheers, everyone.